Welcome to the new quantum era. I'm your host, Sebastian Hassinger. In today's episode, we're going to talk about a topic that's come up before in episodes, but remains one of the critical challenges for quantum computing, which, because it's located at the intersection of quantum information science and complexity theory, can be very difficult to understand. The question is, when someone performs a task on a quantum computer and makes a claim that the performance exceeded that of a classical computer for that task, how can one verify that claim? The motivating force behind the enormous effort and investment in quantum computers is, of course, the promise that they will be able to do something better than a classical computer. If the nature of the advantage is simply that the quantum computer completes the task in a shorter time than the classical computer, the delta in execution time may provide a quantitative verification of that claim. However, in many cases, the claim is that the quantum computer is solving a problem that a classical computer would take an inordinately long time to perform, or that it would take more computational resources than one can realistically provision. In those instances, verifying the quantum advantage by classical means seems very difficult, if not impossible. In practical terms, this difficulty was first faced by the team behind the Google supremacy experiment in 2019. In that case, the claim was made that the task run on the Sycamore chip, which consisted of randomly sampling circuits, was the first demonstration of quantum advantage. One of the contributors to the random circuit sampling experimental design was Scott Aaronson, a theoretical computer scientist and professor at University of Texas, Austin, who we've had on the show before. Observing the verification problem after Google's claim was published, Scott spent some time thinking about potential solutions. A couple of years ago, he proposed a new scheme for demonstrating quantum advantage, then verifying that advantage that involves something called peaked circuits, which he hoped would retain the quantum advantage attributes of random circuit sampling, but could provide an efficient classical means of verification. My guest today, Hrant Gharibyan, CEO and co-founder of BlueQubit, is a theoretical physicist who earned his PhD from Stanford, where he specialized in quantum information and black hole physics, and was a postdoc at Caltech before founding BlueQubit. Hrant at IEEE Quantum Week in Albuquerque a few months ago, and he described to me the work that his team was doing, I immediately decided this needed to be the subject of an episode. So this week at Q2B Silicon Valley, we recorded a discussion about BlueQubit's implementation of Scott Aronson's proposal for peaked circuit quantum advantage verification, what that means, and how they've actually gone further into a practical demonstration and have some interesting plans for extending the protocol they developed with possibly practical implications as well. It was a really interesting conversation. My thanks to Hrant, and a special thanks to QCware and the organizers of Q2B for providing the space for this interview. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you for joining me, Hrant. I'm very excited about this conversation. We met at IEEE Quantum Week in Albuquerque in the line for food. And you told me a little bit about what you were doing, and it was super exciting. I said, let's definitely record an episode when you're ready. And as it happened, we're now at Q2B Silicon Valley, and you're ready. So it was very good timing. But I want you to start. So the work that you're doing is now very interesting. It's a challenge that's going to be, I think, really exciting to see how the community sort of responds and gets involved. But it has to do with peak circuits. And I want you to start by explaining what peak circuits are and what the sort of the purpose of peak circuits is, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having me here, Sebastian. It's really excited to share some of the work that the BlueQubit team has worked on. So the idea of peak circuit actually was originally proposed around 2 years ago by Scott Aaronson and Aaronson and Zhang. And key construction, and the insight that the authors had was to try to come up with a way to make quantum advantage much more clear, and the technical term is like verifiable. So how can we run task in a quantum device that after completion we can verify that it actually solved the right problem, where we know there's a classically difficult to find that solution. And the original construction was done up to like 24 qubits with the simulators, with the exact simulation.
But just one second. So just to be clear, so this is and I think Scott, I've heard him say basically the motivation was to try to find, it's like random circuit sampling was the way of sort of testing quantum advantage around the Google supremacy experiment and everything. But the challenge there is that verifying the solution is also classically very hard. Is that correct?
Yeah. That's exactly right. Okay. In fact, actually, the latest Google's random circuit sampling, and as well as Quantinuum had done a similar work on random circuit sampling, where you run a random quantum circuit on a quantum processor and then just measure the bit string and collect them. So we think it's beyond classically simulable. In fact, like the latest Google's claim was it's like takes septillion years to do it in the largest supercomputer.
Who's got a septillion years?
Nobody got that time, right? But it's an estimate. It's based on some scaling analysis. Yeah. But the fact is, like, nobody knows how to compute the cross entropies. Which is like the technical metric there. So nobody can really verify that the quantum device is doing the right thing. So we're really hoping that it is by believing that our fidelities are like as good as they claim to be.
Right.
But indeed, verification is as long as like simulation.
Right.
And that has been quite a bit of challenge and criticism. So even though we think that the latest experiments are beyond classical, there is no clear way to check, and there has been some attempts, like people who work on tensor networks, like really advanced classical simulation, try to replicate the results. All of them failed so far. You know, the claim has been standing for like over a year, maybe a bit longer. But indeed, like verification has been a big of a puzzle. And I think Scott's attempt 2 years ago was really like with this peak circuit construction.
Right.
To how do you create random circuits that are really random, but then pick it in one specific bit string. That's a secret message you have. So output distribution of the circuit is pretty much random on all the bit string except one that is specially amplified.
Right.
And then they illustrated that these circuits exist, and by doing up to 24 qubit like exact simulation. And then they also had a theoretical argument that there should be a lot of those kind of bit strings in a space of unitaries. So they had advances in a small simulation, and then they had some great ideas in terms of like why this thing should exist. And in fact, there should be a lot of such circuits.
And so if the random circuit produces this peak, and that's a secret, you can use that secret in the classical verification to sort of almost as a shortcut for verification.
That's right.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
So essentially, like as a designer, you create a circuit that has a peak that has a high amplitude. So then if I hand you to the circuit itself, you can run it in a quantum processor, and then immediately by a few thousand measurements, actually, you don't even need millions like of shots, the few thousand, and then you will nicely see the peak.
I see.
As opposed
you can visually verify.
Yeah, you can visually verify very easily, and then as opposed to classically, it would be untractable because it would have all this kind of hardness properties like random circuits. Because if you look at them, they look random. And actually, like Scott's initial paper with the 24 qubit, like had those circuits construction that appeared like all the properties and statistics and like different components of the circuit looked like random circuits. So you could not tell apart. But when you ran it, you saw that it actually had almost random distribution except one bit string that was preselected.
So it's a fake random circuit, essentially.
It's a random circuit that everything is random except one bit string is selected. One secret message is amplified.
I see.
And I think that work was very intriguing to us. And when we saw it like a few years ago, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, actually Scott mentioned it at the Q2B 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think so. I think that was the first time I heard the phrase.
Yep, that's right. And then I think we were quite intrigued, like how scalable it is, because the method they they used to construct the PIC circuits and find them was not scalable, because you basically could not like scale state vector simulations and train those circuits. So first what we did, we just took their protocol and scaled it to like 30 something qubits just by computational classical compute throwing at it. But then next was the updated version of our protocol that really pushed the limits of qubit counts and gate counts to regimes where we can construct such circuits that that are like beyond like classically simulable.
And you've actually done recently a paper where you implemented that on Quantinuum as well, right?
That's exactly right. So essentially, when I met you at the IEEE Quantum, that was ongoing work because at the time we just observed those results on a Quantinuum, and we knew it's like turning into a paper.
Yeah.
And we were like ironing out the paper. The paper we put out on archive like 3-4 weeks ago, like like around a month ago. And the essential point of the paper, there's a protocol that we use to construct PIC circuits at scale. And at scale means like 50 plus qubits. That's beyond like state vector simulable, but we could go to hundreds. So specific circuits we designed were with a Quantinuum like H2 processor in mind. So they are like 56 qubits, like 2,000 up to 2,000 gates. All-to-all connectivity, like essentially all the qubits talk to all the qubits, and then ours, like we pick a secret message, secret bit string on 56 qubits. We create this PIC circuit using our protocol that has a few different stages. One of the stages is pretty similar to original Scott Aaronson protocol, and then we have two other obfuscation strategies. One called swap trick, the other is sweeping trick. Those are described more detail in the paper, but
it sounds like steganography, where you're embedding a plain text message essentially. In steganography, it's usually an image or a sound file or something. So there's a bit stream that you're embedding, often by just doing like a bit shift or whatever. But you're hiding it in plain sight, essentially.
That's exactly. We're doing that same with the quantumly. In classical world, you can call it also hashing, you know, with functions. They were playing similar game with quantum operations we construct, and then we apply it to a circuit that's relatively simple, that has a PIC, but after a few iterations of this classical updates of the circuit, it essentially becomes indistinguishable from the random circuit. It has some distinguished aspects, but it's very hard to tell like what's the PIC, and that's the kind of the key inside, that there is a PIC that has a like pretty good visibility. And the coolest part was when we ran it on Quantinuum to actually observe the PIC. So even though we knew the protocol should preserve the PIC and with a very high amplitude.
So you had to run those steps in reverse to reveal the PIC, those layers of transformation?
No, there's nothing in the reverse need to be. So you choose a bit string, you construct, there's a protocol that builds a circuit that has like 56 qubits, 2,000 qubit gates, and then we end up with a circuit which are publicly available. It's in our platform, and in the paper actually there's a link that you can go, and the circuits appear random, but each of those circuits hides a specific bit string. So if you want to find it on Quantinuum, you like go to Azure or AWS or directly in Nexus or whatever platform. You can submit the circuit and then measure like few thousand shots. And then like a lot of them will have, there'll be like bit strings that appear only once or twice maybe because of some bit flip errors. And then you will have one that is like there's a one nice PIC. So you don't even need air mitigation. Like it's so nicely visible that you don't even need any sophisticated techniques to see.
When another machine comes out, like Helios or another IonQ device or IBM device, are you imagining that you could use your protocol to construct these circuits that could be, you could run them on those devices and get that PIC out of your sample, and at the same time try to replicate the work on a classical computer and and verify that it's intractable essentially.
That's exactly right. So some of the published protocol parts are not really applicable if the geometric restriction comes in, So, but then we have new ideas actually. I think it'll be upcoming work. Like we are collaborating actually with a couple of different
for
companies.
all connectivity.
That's right.
So there's limited connectivity that may.
You have to have a new additions to the protocol, and we have new methods. I think it'll be upcoming work, and we're actually working with a few different like hardware vendors, and quite excited actually for the other systems, because several quantum systems either already are in the regime where they are verifiably quantum advantage regime, or they're about to enter.
Right.
And it's a very exciting time to be.
You're productizing the supremacy experiment, essentially.
And we are. Recently, I read an article where there are all these like supremacy claims, quantum advantage claims, scientific advantage claims. And the one word that was used is they're all obscure and unclear. Like, is the sampling hard? How to do? I think we're trying with these methods and this approach to really like demystify advantage. Say, hey, this is a puzzle. Quantum device solves it in 2 hours. Best known classical methods, at least in the paper, we approached like actually some of the heavy technical part of the paper is really like advanced classical techniques, like tensor networks with belief propagation. And like I'm gonna use technical terms, but like the people who are care about these things know that what are those methods, right?
I care, Hrant.
Yeah, amazing.
And so that kind of brings us to the next thing I wanted to touch on, which I walked by your booth yesterday, and you've got this big challenge poster up with like a big dollar amount on it, a quarter of a Bitcoin as a reward. What is it that you're challenging people to do?
Good. So the challenge is, we know this, finding the secret bit string, we know it's possible with the quantum computers, with Quantinuum systems. We want people, and we claim that classically it's impossible. In fact, we tried to do our best, and our estimate for the state-of-the-art classical algorithms is like few years in the largest supercomputers, like exascale, like Frontier or Summit, 3 years. So it's like, in practice, it's not doable. So we want the community to really try to challenge this claim in a way of, like by the way of finding novel algorithms that try to find shortcuts in finding the bit string. If they succeed, I think we should recalibrate the claim of the hardness. But if they don't, I think this would be like a standing trust. Like it will develop a public trust on the claim. It's a bounty, exactly. And this was inspired by the RSA challenge that actually like drove a lot of the trust in the modern encryption, that we use every day now. And it was a claim that was not mathematically provable to be hard, but there was a lot of effort to explore all possible attack strategies and then fail, and then by that winning.
Did Peter Shor get that bounty, by the way?
He might after we have fault-tolerant quantum computers. I think he should get that.
He theoretically gets that.
He theoretically gets that.
Okay, so that's great. So in effect, you're hoping that you don't give away the quarter of a Bitcoin.
That's right. That's right.
But it's good incentive to all of those complexity theorists and mathematicians who are dequantizing quantum advantage claims in the past. That's great.
That's exactly right. And there has been a lot of great work done. After Google's initial claims, there was a good body of work with tensor network techniques, and I think there's still some room to improve. But I think we're reaching a point where the gap is so large that it's going to be really hard for classical machines to catch up.
And I guess if someone does claim the bounty, then that gives you, whatever method they actually come up with, that gives you something to add into your protocol to try to, I get
Absolutely. I think it's arms race, and exactly. And the same happened with RSA. The first few instances were broken, and then improvements were made until there was a trustworthy protocol.
That's really cool. And so, RSA is actually an encryption method. This is a verification method of classical hardness, essentially, or quantum, advantage. But you've also mentioned, I think, or it came up in the recent paper, that there may be sort of cryptographic application of this protocol as well, potentially. Is that right?
Yeah. So we have a section.
I mean, you're using the term secret, so that kind of implies.
Exactly. I think by construction it is, right? It is a protocol that one could use potentially for cryptographic usage, if it stands the test, right, of classical hardness.
Yeah.
It's actually quite a unique protocol idea. We have a section where we kind of discuss that. We don't go into too deep of a detail because primary reasoning for the paper was the advantage gap, the gap classical versus quantum. But if the protocol stands and there's no way to break it classically and the trust is validated, I think essentially this is encryption methods where you could encrypt bit strings. The throughput is pretty bad.
But maybe for encryption in place, for example.
That's right.
Right?
I mean, there might be some niche use cases where it totally makes sense, where you encrypt into a quantum circuit, right? So you have a classical bit string. That's the secret.
A very short one.
Yeah, very short one, but you could repeat it, right?
That's true.
Like if you you could have several circuits. It's not crazy bad, but it's still not with the state of the art classical encryptions, right? But the cool aspect of it is that people who have quantum computers that have capabilities beyond certain level, like fidelities, number of qubits, above H2 processor, they would be the only ones who can decrypt the message, right? So if you have a communication that it required quantum computer to decrypt it, it's essentially quantum unsafe encryption, but classically safe, right? Basically nobody with classical computers can decrypt it. There's actually another interesting aspect of the protocol that you can modify. By changing the input state, you could also make quantumly safe. So essentially, if you don't know the starting bit string, you will never find the peak, because it essentially on any other bit string to start with, it creates a random state. Right. It's not picked, so it's only picked in a specific case, and that could be a private key. So you not only need a quantum computer, you need a quantum computer and a private key to decrypt it. So you could, it's an interesting opens a lot of interesting avenues for working with it. We haven't really spent too much time in terms of actually understanding its commercial or implications.
Right.
I think the primary purpose is to really test, stress test, the classical hardness. If it's withstand, I think the interest in spending more effort in that direction will grow. But we still discussed it as a paragraph and hypothetical scenarios, and we had some equations there too. So
nice. So the challenge is on. Where can they go to learn about the challenge in more detail?
Good. So if you go to Blue Qubit website and then go to hackathons page, it's right there, the first Blue Qubit Quantum Advantage Challenge.
Are you actually going to have some event that's actually a live hackathon, or is it sort of an ongoing?
Oh no, it's ongoing. It's just like RSA, because we really want to give people the time.
Yeah, of course.
I think we're going to keep going, and we just announced it. And I think the key steps, you go to Blue Qubit website, either app.bluequbit.io or directly bluequbit.io. Go to hackathons, and then there's a Quantum Advantage Challenge. You can sign up.
Cool.
And then enter the competition. And the first few circuits are already released. So you can actually get on it and start testing some of the classical algorithms you have.
And is the next step for you, now the challenge is on, of course, if you get some results that you need to verify or evaluate as being a better solution classically, there'll be that work. But in terms of your own independent next steps for Blue Qubit, is it look at other topologies and see if you can implement it on a lattice
this is actually very active area of research. In fact, another area is where more theoretically, a hardness, arguing why this hashing we do is hard. I think we have a heuristic understanding, but there might be potentially theoretical arguments as well for it. And then there's academics that we talk to who are experts in complexity theory and so on. But on a heuristic side, indeed, we're working with I don't want to share too much because of our hardware partners. But yeah, absolutely. I think we want to generalize it so we can build those circuits for arbitrary lattice connectivity and different fidelities. And
you
really
can almost imagine potentially getting to the point where you've got a toolkit where you can take a unique topology and then use your toolkit to adapt your protocol to that topology.
Yeah. I mean, one vision we have is potentially even have a machinery that's very easy. You give the fidelities, even gate limitations, connectivities, gate set, your system works, and we generate a peak circuit for you that you can easily validate its peak on your quantum device. And then you can check with our own like tensor network or like Pauli path simulators that it's really hard to do classically. And yeah.
And okay, so I mean, I love all this conversation, and thank you for explaining peak circuits, because I've been very curious, and I think the topic of advantage and verifiable advantage is really important for the industry as a whole. And the podcast tends to focus on the science and the research, but you're also a startup.
Yep.
So how does this translate into, I mean, are you doing other things in addition to this? Is there some, sort of creation of value from this peak circuit protocol itself, or pitch me?
Yeah. I think to give you like a one-line kind of pitch is that it's all about capability building and talent, and we want to be really develop expertise and depth and strength in algorithms, because building hardware is hard, and hardware companies are really putting a lot of effort to it. And being like a company one level above that, where we only think about advantage style algorithms for scientific discovery and later for commercial. But we have to have the scientific nailed down to move to commercial.
And also be hardware aware.
And be hardware aware, understand the strength and weaknesses, because each use case have a different. Sometimes with the low like shot count, there's no way you can run that algorithm, even if fidelities are amazing and connectivity is there. Sometimes it's the opposite, right? Like connectivity really gives you a huge like leap forward for the problem. And we want to develop the depth as a company to do that.
Well, and it makes total sense to focus on, creating verifiable tests of quantum advantage to learn exactly what those strengths and weaknesses and trade-offs and et cetera are that are going to inform your algorithms. So
exactly. We want to be awesome. Yep, that's the plan.
And so you said scientific algorithm or scientific discovery first. Is this sort of material science and small molecule chemistry, that kind of
So our peak circuit is also scientific advantage, right? Okay. Potentially could be cryptographic applications, right? But this is not there yet, but it's a scientific advantage of well-defined problem that we have a scientific gap between like quantum solution and classical.
Right.
Next, I think indeed, condensed matter physics, material science is another project within our team, right? Like Google's inspired by a lot of Google's recent work on out-of-time autocorrelators. Right. I think there's going to be like very near-term things, and Fermi-Hubbard models from Quantinuum team, very exciting, where like we actually are seeing first examples of like very complicated material problems that quantum device can simulate that is beyond classical, even if you buy NVIDIA GPUs for 5 years.
Feynman's dream, right?
Yep, precisely right.
And I think you're exactly right in that these machines are going to be exotic lab instruments that are of enormous value to physical science.
High energy physicists, material scientists.
Long before they have some kind of, the equivalent of a spreadsheet, like a killer app that runs that every industry wants or whatever. And in fact, I feel like scientific applications and advantage is where you're going to find the seeds of those eventual generalizable kind of use cases.
That's absolutely right. Yeah. And then once you start talking to like large manufacturing companies, pharmaceutical companies, and really understand how they do like chemistry modeling, like material modeling, you realize it's just a matter of scaling from there. Once you're at scientific advantage, I think larger scale models will actually benefit a lot of industries, which are like spending substantial amount of money on like R&D and experiments in the lab, where they could replace this with a like running 5 minutes on a quantum chip.
Amazing.
Right? And that's I think is the future, like in the next decade, essentially, from going from scientific to commercial.
Right. Well, that's super exciting, Hrant. I really appreciate the time and the explanation, and I'm going to keep an eye out for the results of the challenge and the next paper and the next algorithm, and I wish you the best, and I think BlueQubit's really a company to watch, so thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and I'm also very excited about the future of quantum and how our challenge will...
Of course, we're here. Of course we are.
Exactly.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the podcast, a production of the New Quantum Era, hosted by me, Sebastian Hassinger, with theme music by OCH. You can find past episodes on www.newquantumera.com or on Blue Sky at newquantumera.com. If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and tell your quantum curious friends to give it a listen.